Hi everyone. I think I'll first talk a bit about me, then sort of segue into my role. I think first a multi-hyphenate Pan-Africanist at heart. And this is because I think that over time I've come to learn that my blood runs and bleeds Africa and not necessarily my country. And so the work that I've done all through my life, moving from, entrepreneurship, innovation, now going into policy, was driven by my need to figure out what is the root of Africa's current issues and how we can solve them. And so my work at the UNDP's Timbuktu Policy Impact Unit is very deliberate and intentional. That work is, as a policy specialist, how do we work on the ground to mobilize, challenges, mobilize, evidence, real life lived experiences from founders and innovators in African tech ecosystem, and work together with key stakeholders in the different countries that we're working in to co-create and co-design these policy and regulatory frameworks that can now be implemented towards removing the bottlenecks that before African entrepreneurs. But then on the harmonization level, this is now us working across the different bodies, or working with different bodies. So think AU, AFCFTA, think of the regional, the RECs, right? So think West Africa, ECOWAS, COMESA, EACs, SADC, just to make sure that policies and regulations are sort of harmonized, standardization across levels, so that an African entrepreneur can move from Nigeria to Lusaka to Rwanda without having to face different kind of bottlenecks at different checkpoints. Why this summit and why now, right? And the honest answer is that the work that we do, with ministries, departments, agencies in government, that everyday slow, deliberate work of co-creating, co-designing frameworks, convening technical experts for sessions and workshops. While that is great and very needed, it does not replace the work that can happen when you come to summits like this. And it's super important to understand that work that we do with ministries is largely out of public view. But policy requires momentum. Policy without momentum stalls or failed. And so summits like this are timely because first, it's a gathering of everybody that you need in the room, same place, same time, and also sort of with their guards down. Because now they're not in the office, so they can come here, and you realize that conversations and even a boatload of work that could have taken 6 months to get done, get sort of crammed into the conversations that we have, at these summits. Why now? I think that AFCFTA is live, the Africa conversations and being heard. There is that political willpower, right, to start to look at Africa and say, let's go to the work. And so Timbuktu, as a knowledge partner, is saying, we have gotten on-the-ground information and evidence, the rigor of what we do on a day-to-day. We're bringing that to the conversations we're going to have to say, here is the evidence from the founders, the real-life solution providers, the innovators. And here is the evidence and the issues that have been raised. How do we now co-create or co-diagnose the problem towards building the solutions? We've signed all the agreements, the protocols, we have all the paperwork and everything done. But if we really want it, we have to do more. And the core argument that I'm bringing into that room is that of the border frictions. And whether it's for trade or it's for capital or people, border frictions are almost never accidental. There is someone, right, who's paying the cost, but there's also someone who's benefiting. And so it's super important that when we have these conversations that we name it. We name all the problems, we name the people who are benefiting, and then we get very uncomfortable enough to begin to diagnose what those issues are and how we begin to solve them. At the very basic, we want the private sector people, the people who are the businessmen and women who are facing these issues or bottlenecks, right, at the checkpoints. to be part of that conversation, to share it real life with government, partners. Because when you talk about how unreal the challenges are at the border, sometimes the government people don't really understand. We were recently at the CEO forum, and you have a fantastic businessman like Bua say to you that he was stopped at the border, right? And that begs you to say that if Africa really wants to trade with itself, the first thing it will think of is to, open up its borders. And so I think for me, more is the institutional willpower is what we need now. We need the institutions to come through. We need the financial markets, right, to open up. We need financial institutions to invest in, opening up the borders. We need Africa to be able to move within itself. Because if you say let's trade, if you say let's build within each other, and the doors are shut, then it means we're not serious. A lot of the conversation at the very basic that we will get here will be shared diagnosis and a roadmap towards action into what we're going to do. But post the summit, the work that we're going to continue to do as the policy impact unit is now that action. How do we work with key, government stakeholders, private sector members that have been identified to be able to begin to put some of these actions into play? I'm hoping to unlock a set of relationships here, some sort of visibility where our next entrepreneur and innovation square tables or our sessions with government will be received with more open arms because they have now heard us speak at this summit. They have heard us share they have been part of the conversation, so that they're now more open towards being part of future work that we're going to do. And I'm also listening hard this week for what is working in sort of comparable context. It is real to understand that maybe some of the things that we have been hearing before or what we've been learning about how to support, it's not necessarily what is. Coming here, we are now seeing that there are more, the communities and societies are taking it by themselves to offer up what solutions, they require. And so that's what I'm going to now be looking out for. Comparable context where solutions have been deployed, where it has worked, and where maybe we can begin to evolve as a society towards sort of supporting people. We've got a lot of people across different sectors and different stakeholders have great appetite about the work they want to do in Africa. But it's uneven because while, you've seen different institutions willing to go the extra mile, we've also seen some who still say the policy is not right, the regulatory environment is not right. But the argument I would make there is that while we are waiting for the policy environment to be perfect, some other people are making that investment and they are taking that bet. And those are the people who are going to be the architects of whatever future Africa has tomorrow. So it's important that we not wait for that perfect political environment. The second for me is the private sector gap, right? More and more rooms like this are always organized, and there is a gap where there's not a lot of private sector players in the room. We need to change that. We need to bring in more private sector players, because my theory of change is that Africa is not going to be built by development finance, neither will it be built by handouts. It's going to be built by backing mission-driven founders who are going to be building some of the strongest solutions that are solving Africa's hardest problems. And so the private sector will be very key. And finally for me is, and this is the one I'll take back to the team, is that the language of integration is shifting and we need to listen and listen well.